Welcome back to the workbench. In this video I'll be looking at how I built this model of Morristown and Erie number 22, which is a former GP9 which was converted with a Sulzer engine, classified as a TE47-4E locomotive. It arrived at the Morristown and Erie in the late 90s and was, I believe, was going to be converted back to having an EMD GP9 engine. Unfortunately got vandalised in the process and was never finished, and it's been on the railway for the last sort of 20-25 years without being used. I really like the look of the locomotive. It always looks very smart in the photos that I've seen of it on railroadpicturearchive.net, and I think it's quite a nice looking loco, so I fancied building what is quite possibly the only model that's ever existed of it. I may be proved wrong on that, of course. So this is the process of how I went about doing that.
So the base locomotive of this project is a Proto2000 GP9 high hood, which I bought off eBay probably about 4 years ago with the intention of doing this, and it's been sitting on the awaiting projects bench ever since. So the first part of the conversion was to dismantle the body, remove the short hood and cab, and soak the whole thing in IPA to take off the original black paint. The initial isopropyl dip didn't fully remove all the paint, but during the course of the conversion process I re-dipped it, gave it a really good soaking and fully cleaned up all the components, and as the video goes on you'll see that the look of it improves as it goes on. So I tackled the frame first, cutting away the front toolboxes, and I used the parts I'd removed to fill in the footplate where the gaps were that I'd taken out, and I also used plasticard to fill the gap on the face where the steps will be fitted. Whilst I was working on the frame, I also constructed the replacement cab, which is a Canon company kit built as per the instructions. It had a plated over front on the number boards, obviously where it's intended that a headlight will have been removed. I've drilled that out and I fitted a brass detail headlight to that. I've also had to file down the rear of the roof flush with the back of the cab. The cab isn't 100% accurate to the locomotive, but for this project I felt it was close enough for what I wanted. Inside the cab roof I added some trunking from evergreen plasticard for the headlamp wires to run through, and I've also plated over the back of the number board fitting in the front of the cab in an attempt to hopefully prevent any light bleed from the headlight once it's on. At this point I conducted a test fit of the body to the chassis, and having confirmed that it all fitted correctly I glued the cab in place onto the frames, as I needed that to be fitted in order to construct the front hood, which would then allow me to make the steps that run up on the front footplate. With the cab fitted, I then started work on the short hood itself, this being constructed from 40 thou plasticard. There were some quite complicated angles, but I think I managed to capture the look of the prototype reasonably well. I salvaged the grab irons, lift rings and sand filler from the original short hood from the model and used them to detail the new short hood. The class lights are made from evergreen tube, filed really thin. They are a little bit chunky, but hopefully they won't be too obvious once the model is completed. With the short hood glued in place, I was then able to add the front steps and attach the long hood to the cab and to the frames, so the whole of the body is now one unit, can't now be taken apart. It was at this point I popped the body on and tested the model and discovered that, as is frequently the case with the Proto2000 models, the gears were split. Luckily I was able to get some new replacements from replacement wheel sets from the American Railroad Centre in Bodmin, and with them fitted the chassis ran smoothly, though it is a little noisy. With the last few details fitted to the body, it was time to paint the model. This is my first full locomotive respray and I really wanted to get it right, so I took my time with this and worked through it really slowly, but I really wanted it to come out with a good finish. With the yellow end stripes and the yellow stripe at the top of the body, I decided to use a pink primer in order to provide the best base for the yellow paint. And I thought that would also work well with obviously the main red colour of the body. Having primed it, I then sprayed the yellow. For some reason, I sprayed rather more of the body than I needed to, but the yellow being a light colour, I didn't think it would affect the overlying red too much, so I left it as it was. With the yellow paint on, I carefully masked all the yellow elements, which were quite complicated, particularly the stripes on the front and rear. They slope down at an angle and around the corners. I also masked all the areas that we painted black and grey, as I didn't want to spray these in red and then overspray them. I did spend quite a bit of time deciding on the painting order for the model and what areas were going to be masked when, in order to sort of minimize the amount of remasking I had to do. So I masked in layers so that after each paint I could either add another layer of tape or take a previous layer off without having to keep redoing bits. So the yellow was masked first, and that masking stayed on throughout the painting process. So next up was to paint the red, which once dry was masked in order for the grey walkways and the short hood top to be painted. And once that was done, I removed the masking from the roof and then remasked all the red and grey areas so that I could paint the areas that would be black. And for the black, I used the Tamiya rubber black rather than the XF. I think it's XF1, the straight black, but it's too black, and I thought a slightly less intense black would look better on the model, and I think that has worked out quite well. With the black paint on, I carefully removed all the masking, and I have to say I was pretty amazed with the results that I'd achieved. I'm really happy with the paint finish that I've managed to create on the model. The yellow stripes on the ends were particularly challenging, particularly as a sort of first full project. I'm really happy with how they've turned out. Between each layer of masking, I added flat coat, and I think that worked really well at preventing paint bleed under the masking tape. There was only a couple of tiny areas that needed touching up once that was done. And with the paint finish, I coated the whole model using the Army Painter flat coat from a can, which has given it a really nice finish. So at this stage I was nearly there. I added the glazing to the cab and the number boards as per the instructions on the cab kit, and I've kept the number box separate at the moment so that I can add the numbers to it more easily, and also sort out the arrangements for the lighting once I've decided how that's all going to go together. I then painted all the final details for the pilot, and painted and weathered the trucks and fuel tank. The front handrails had to be rebuilt to accommodate the change in shape of the front frame, and I did this using evergreen styrene, I think it was 20,000 rod. In hindsight, I wish I'd fabricated the handrails from brass, which would have produced a much stronger result and a slightly finer handrail as well.
So with all the parts finally painted and ready to go, I thought I'd just video the last bit of this, kind of the exciting part for me, which is the final assembly of the whole lot. I've got all the bits laid out here now. I've painted everything. I've weathered I just painted and weathered the truck sides and the fuel tank. I'm probably not going to, certainly for the moment, I'm not going to weather the rest of it. I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm really happy with how the paint's turned out, and I'm just a bit nervous about weathering it, to be honest. Made a couple of slight changes. Error of observation, I painted the ends of the steps yellow, so they're now white, and all of the grab irons are all white now as well, so that's all done. Got the wires still dangling out there. They're obviously for the headlight, but until I sort out how I'm going to control it, they're just going to carry on dangling for now. I'll do something with them once they're inside. Right, so I'm going to pop it all together. I'm going to hold any of the parts that need fixing in. I shall use a bit of Liquitex excuse me, acrylic medium. I'll just pop a tiny little dab on a bit of plasticard. There's not a huge amount of it. It actually needs probably fixing in place. I think a lot of it will just sort of hold together naturally, but there we are. I'll get it assembled.
Most of the details from the original model were a push friction fit to the pilots, but in places I had to ream out the holes very slightly in order to get a fit, due to obviously both the detail and the hole having paint in them. I used a dab of matte medium on the back just to hold them in place a little more securely if I'd over-reamed or over-enlarged the hole slightly. During fitting the handrails, I realised that I'd overpainted the red and needed to add some extra black in a couple of places where the stanchion is fitted to the frame side, which is black obviously, and I did that using AK real colour markers rather than re-airbrushing just the tiny little ends of the handrails, and that seems to have worked pretty well. Once that was all done, the final details I added were some etch brass sunshades to the cab sides. I secured them in place with matte medium, and I attached the horn to the roof, which I'd salvaged from the original model. Unfortunately, I managed to very quickly knock that off and break the fitting that I've made for it, so I'll need to come up with a better solution to fit that, and I'll probably see if I can get a brass detail, which will be a better fitting to have on the model.